that we've got. We're all here for a really awesome purpose, and it's great to see the community come together this way. I'm not going to take much of your time. I just wanted to quickly, but very appreciatively thank some of our folks here in town, and hopefully that have donated to Anna's campaign. A couple of our really awesome donors. We appreciate all of you so much. We have Wooding Gym. We have L&L Land and Livestock. We have the Taco Guy. We've got Shaw Shooting, and that leads me to a point, guys, I don't know if you noticed over here, but we've got a silent auction going on tonight. And everything that's up for auction is from Shaw Shooting, so please take a minute and check it out. It's pretty awesome. We have CCI Cream, and we have Self-Load Binder, as well as Pickles Bar and Grill. And next up, I want to introduce our local cowman. That's what he calls himself. Mr. Brian Lambert.
Before we get started, I'd like to have a word of prayer. Chuck will come up and give us that invitation.
Our Father, who art in heaven, we're grateful this evening for the opportunity to come together as friends and neighbors. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to learn about our freedoms and the chance we have to participate in keeping our freedoms in this state and enjoying the type of lifestyle we enjoy. We're so blessed with. Be with us tonight that we'll have wisdom. As we listen, that we'll be able to understand and comprehend the things that have been prepared for us. We can make wise decisions, we pray. And we thank you for all our many blessings in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Just so you know, I got roped into this. Hold up, hierarchy there. Before we get started, for you two riled up, we want to really put some attention to this donation box. This is how we fund the campaigns. It's good that you go vote. So when you give $1, they can raise the attention to someone else to go vote. That's how it works. So not only is your vote important, but so is the assistance that find flyers and organizations and functions like this to move forward, to help make awareness. I learned then and Bundy about Bunkerville and Skeet Nevada program. If you remember that from the news, I'll give you a little bit of credentials on me just so you know how wacky I am. I'm a cowman. I drove a truck 4.5 million miles on the logbook. That's the only one we kept track of. I run a drink business. I've adopted kids. I learned to be explicit. I've dealt with our Idaho state government. At the age of 8, my parents, thank my good parents, dragged me to the John Birch Society meetings where I learned about the Constitution. Never was taught much in school about the Constitution, but I learned it long before. Learned to appreciate it. Learned the special men were promoted, dedicated, set aside by God to make this free country. Some of us are obviously too young to remember how we came here. From England, bound with restrictions from your freedom of worship, taxation, all the things that we're experiencing now. Seems like we're right back at it. Back to Bundy, back to Ammon, sorry, it's easier for me to remember last name than first name. I attended a little Hazelton meeting, took my boys, I've trained all my boys that liberty, freedom is something that we should be glad to die for if necessary. and I put on a card, gave a donation. And then I was contacted how I wanted to help, and I've got some banners and stuff up to help everybody that drives on 84 to know about a candidate for governor. My next, I wanted to go to Bunkerville real bad. I got to tell you, that my wife held me down. Thank God for wives sometimes. It brought my attention to the wife that Anna is married to. Stop and think what she's gone through. If you don't know anything about what he's gone through, the support she's given him, what it means, a tremendous woman that she is. The next thing was Burns, Oregon. Being a cattleman, that did not set well with me, still does not to this day. I travel through there twice a month to go to Klamath Falls to check cattle. Every time I cross Harnett County, it does not set well with me that we allowed the FBI to kill an innocent cattleman. If you haven't watched the movie American Standoff, you need to get that movie and watch it. You need to see that they never pulled their guns. They wore them. It's important for you to maintain your right to own a gun. It's merely a threat to our government to not push us too far. We don't want to stand up and go blazing and shoot things like our counter liberals do, tearing up private property, causing businesses to have fires. But they've got to know that that's one thing, among many things, you better not mess with. I didn't get the poster put up, so I got a phone call that they were coming through town, and I got to spend the day with Ammon and his daughter and his campaign manager, and we got to put those banners up that day, talk some more, get some clarity to some questions I had. You're here because you're farmers, businessmen, moms and dads and grandpas. You got kids. I don't have to tell you too much more, but they're encroaching on us fast. The power that a governor has in this state has not yet been challenged. Some things that are sensitive to me are grazing rights. I'll tell you a couple of stories. 2 years ago, I tried to get the piece of BLM ground between the I-84 and 86 split. I need feed, they need fire control. You know what happened 2 years ago? It burned. Took out the cell tower, remember that? Most recently, Willow Springs grazed the BLM piece across the bridge from Twin Falls. The year before, the government decided to tease all of us guys that were going to the media to complain about fire control. Allowed them to come in December and stay past May. This year, out they went at the end of April. What happened to start raining in May, and all that feed got burned. Webb family out here on Highway 46, another good example. Weren't allowed to stay long enough. And it's burned. The governor should be in charge of the Idaho ground. Should be able to get revenue to people who desire it so. We had a great lumber program until the government got involved. And now look at 5 cities north on 95 used to have sawmills. Don't have them now. It needs to be changed, and I'm sure you people know that's why you're here. If you can't get over the fact that Trump and Ammon are just a little bit more assertive than you are, don't mind being teased and ridiculed, how many of you left your job to go help his dad's problem in Bunker? How many of you left your job and go to Burns, Oregon to help the Hammonds, another good cowman, stripped of their rights? I didn't either. For that I'm ashamed. But like Trump, he doesn't mind making a fuss. Fight for a child's right not to be taken from his parents, and the best they can do is a trespass charge. The best thing they can do is a civil suit. and then get on the media and act like he didn't show up, doesn't respect the law. He doesn't have to show up to a civil suit. That's his choice. Get your indictment, see if you can collect it. That's how I handle it. Real words of wisdom. Takes a little more gut. We got to grow some guts. We got to not be afraid to open our mouth. If each one of us here can get one other person to vote how we vote, we can make a difference. I'll let him correct me on anything I've said wrong, timing, or numbers. I watched in '83. I worked for an oil field company down in the Hanksville, Utah area, and they pulled the wells back and capped everything off. Hanksville, Utah, between Monticello and Zion's Park. I did the seismographic there. I had a team with other people. That country is black as night. Obama set aside wilderness. Can't grill, can't graze cattle. Two of my friends in Monticello and Landing lost their livelihood. Nothing to pass on to their kids because of wilderness area. That governor should have stopped that. That oil field makes North Dakota look like a puddle. So you go back and you say, well, I didn't hear this on Fox or CNN, so I don't know if it's true. Well, you're hearing it from me. I was there. I did it. I saw it. I've talked to those ranchers before that, after that. It fired my blood up. It makes me want to vote 4 times. Is there any ballots that I can vote 4 times? Oh, I guess that's the wrong party. So, laugh about a simple truck driver. When the truck driver declares that he took votes from New Jersey to Pennsylvania, somebody ought to be checking that out. When a girl says her mother got sent a ballot who died 11 years prior, someone ought to be checking it out. So with that, I hope I've fired you up. I hope I haven't taken away from your message. But I want you to know that, again, tonight, I'm going to give Adam a check. Because I want him to do another function somewhere and get another 80 votes. And that's how he puts things. Again, take advantage of the silent auction. Get the donation deals, go right over there in another clear box and help this guy succeed. Hammond?
All right, thank you for being here. I got my TED Talks mic on. So, can everybody hear me okay in the back? Am I too loud to hear in the front? All right, we're just right there. Well, I'm grateful for you to take the time out and come here and listen to me and to participate and be here as a community. I think it is our civil responsibility to understand who and what you're voting for. And if I get a chance to get through this material, hopefully in the end you'll see what's happening in Idaho and what concerns that we should have and we should understand in Idaho. And one of the things that is a great concern is that people are going down to the voting booth and they don't know anything about the candidates. And if it has an R next to the name or a D, and in Idaho it's mostly an R, they just somehow automatically trust that they're going to be somebody good. And what it's doing is it's allowing those who don't have conservative principles, who don't believe in even the Idaho Republican platform, it's allowing them to come into the Republican Party and gain a lot of power and stay in for a very long time. And yet they're pushing a democratic liberal agenda. And we just keep going down year after year, election after election, and voting them in. And that's what's becoming very detrimental, especially here in Idaho, because the people of Idaho are very conservative, God-fearing people that want to be good neighbors, that love each other, and they're trusting that the Republican Party is presenting the right candidates. And I don't know if you want to see the challenge that's happening in the Republican Party right now. go to the Idaho GOP website and look at the last press release from Dorothy Moon. It's powerful because the party has been infiltrated by leftists, and it is a struggle right now to get it back. And so we have to be very, very selective, and also we have to understand who we're electing. So thank you for being here. Now, I have to ask a question first before we get going, and the reason why I think it's very important that we lay a foundation that we can all somewhat get on the same page. And I know that's hard to do, but I hope by the end of this, you'll at least somewhat understand and agree with each other. And so the question I'm going to ask you right off the bat is, what is liberty? You think it might seem really simple, right? But when you really ponder it, like, do you know what liberty is? Do you know what freedom is? Freedom. Because I have to, we say it, we sing about it. I was in Moab the other day, and this was on one of their monuments, and the stars are those who gave their lives for freedom. So we send our young men and our young women off to war, and they die for freedom. But we may not necessarily know what it is. And I want to try to define it today, because I think it's very, very important to define it. And so, and I have to admit that I did not contemplate liberty or really understand liberty until I was in a position where my liberty was completely taken away. I was set in solitary confinement in a federal prison for months and months and months, and I never even committed a crime. And I was held away from my family for 2 years, along with my brothers, my dad, many other people. Never once was able to have any physical contact with each of our wives or our children. And that was when I began to really contemplate liberty. And I came to this conclusion of what liberty is, this definition. So I want to present it to you, and then I want to give you some authority behind it. Because liberty is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. Now think about that. Why is it? I want you to adopt this definition, because it's so important, and I'm going to apply it here, that we understand what liberty is. How are we going to really defend it? How are we going to know when it's taken away? How are we going to know who is taking it if we don't know what the definition of it is? And I believe that the definition of liberty is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. And now, let me put some authority behind it. I think Thomas Paine is a pretty good authority, right? Well, let's look at what he says liberty is. Liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of every individual has no limits, save those that assure to other members of society the enjoyment of the same right. Is he not saying the exact same thing? It's much more articulate, but it's the exact same thing. Liberty is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. How about Thomas Jefferson? He's a good authority, right? The author of the Declaration of Independence, one of the greatest founders of our nation. He says, rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will, within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So he's saying the very same thing. It's unobstructed action according to our will, within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Then, of course, he defines that it's not necessary. The law is not necessarily liberty. In fact, individual rights are above the law, and sometimes the law is but the tyrant's will. And so he is saying the same thing, that liberty is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. Now, I want to apply this, because it's easy to say, but let's apply this in our lives. And I hope you can do this with me. So, about freedom to worship. What does that mean according to the definition? To be able to worship whatever you want, as long as, whenever you want, however you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. That's freedom to worship. To be able to worship whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's right. Now, I'm not saying that's going to bring salvation to you, right? I'm not saying that if you decide to worship a yellow dog that you're going to receive salvation. That's not what I'm saying. One guy says, well, if you do that, you might get ticks, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is our country was founded upon the principle that you can worship whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. What about the right to own and control property? Freedom to property. Right? So let's define it. The ability to do whatever you want with your property as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Now let's go through the exercise. Are we losing freedom of a property? Own and control? We are, right? See, now we've defined freedom, we can see that we're losing it. And also, you know who's taking it. You know who's taking it. It might be your neighbor across the street, it might be someone in the church, it might be, they're actually implementing because they don't know or don't believe or are completely against freedom. And so they want to restrict your property, they want to control it, even though you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights. And so we have to apply this, therefore we know what liberty is, we know when it's being taken, we know who is taking it, and we know what we have to do to get it back. Right? Very clear, the freedom to travel. This is just a simple list. This certainly doesn't. What about the freedom to trade? To be able to trade whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights. Right? So I can't go steal something and then trade it. That's not freedom because I'm infringing upon somebody's rights. Or I can't force someone to trade with me. Or I can't for someone to buy something or sell something at my terms. It has to be a willing buyer, willing seller. But freedom to trade is the ability to trade whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. And so I'm gonna just give it a little more authority because remember who was the author of the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson, right? And I just read you his definition of liberty. So now let's read a very well-known paragraph, or sentence really, in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that these rights come from God, and he listed some of them. Life, liberty, and we know what the definition of liberty is according to Thomas Jefferson. So this was the definition, the ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. So our founding documents, our nation was built upon the belief that liberty and freedom was the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. All right. So with that being said, I got to be a little careful with time here, so I'm actually going to go through a few things, but I want you to know just a few things about me. I'm going to skip most of this because I go through a little bit of my background because I want people to have confidence in it, but I want to get to the core of what's happening in Idaho. So, but there's one thing I really want to do. I want to introduce my parents. Clive and Carol Button. I was raised by goodly parents, and I was taught right from wrong, and I was taught how to work, and I also was taught when to compromise and when not to compromise, and when it's right to compromise and when it's not to compromise. And so I am blessed to be raised by good parents, and I love to show this. I show this to almost every town hall meeting that I have, which we're pushing well over 200 of these, by the way. So it's been quite a trip. And also, I am very proud to say that my mother is from a good little place called Gooding, Idaho. I've been waiting to say that for like a year and a half. I finally made it. And she is a wonderful woman that chose to be my mother, along with many of my wild brothers and one sister. And she is a wonderful lady, and my father and mother are wonderful people. And I hope that people can say, by looking at me, looking at my brothers, that by their fruits you shall know them, because they're good people. I would love to go and tell you about the ranch and all the things that kind of transpired in my life and where I grew up. I do want to introduce you to my wife, Lisa. I met her in Cedar City, Utah. I was there for a long time wondering why I was stuck there, and I finally met her, married her, and then we left just a few months later. We went down to Arizona and built a life down there. And I started a business. We had 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. My oldest right now is 20. She's living in Moscow. She's been married for a little over a year, and they're expecting. And my youngest is 7 years old. Before just last month, my daughter turned 20. So before that, I had 4 teenagers all at the same time. So I'm in the mix of it, just like many of you. I'm right in the middle of it. Anyway, we did start out in Arizona, and when I was there, we had a good life, and it was a struggle getting our feet on the ground like normal. And I started a business, a fleet maintenance, shop management business. And I built one of the largest private fleet maintenance businesses in Arizona. And so I've hired hundreds of people, dealt with millions of dollars of budgets, and I've learned how to build and create things, processes and procedures, and deal with people, really starting from scratch. And I tell you that for only one reason, because I want you to see another side of me. That I am an entrepreneur, that I have had a lot of experience in managing and dealing with budgets and the things that will be required as a governor. Now, when I was about 16, 17 years in business, I could see that industry, I actually saw it long before, I did anything about it, but I could see that industry was really lacking technology. For whatever reason, there just wasn't good technology and there wasn't good software. And so my dad taught me that if you can't find something you need, or if you can't find a job, you create it, you make one. We live in the United States of America, you make it. And so I put a team together and we built software for that industry. And it took us several years. And, my technicians were guinea pigs, my customers were guinea pigs, and my vendors were guinea pigs, and my office staff, and everybody was working together, and they knew what I was doing. And we were all working together, and it took us almost 4 years to build it. And we ended up building this software, and it worked so well in my shop and made such an impact in my shop that we began selling it to other shops. And now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. So again, just a little bit about my entrepreneurial background. Some people might be saying, well, why did you leave the ranch? Well, I left the ranch, I tease about this, because it looks like this. Or it looks like this. No, that's not really the reason why. That is the reason, but that's not really why. Because I believe that the ranch is beautiful in its own right. But it doesn't produce enough living for as many kids as my father had. And I was right in the middle. And about 15 years old, he came to me and told me that the ranch wasn't big enough for the both of us. And that I was going to have, he wasn't being mean about that. But he told me that I was most likely going to have to go and find a living somewhere else. That the ranch just didn't produce enough of an income for more than a couple families. And so that's what I ended up doing. I served a mission in Minnesota. A great time, a sacred time for me. When I came home, I got a little schooling, and I went right to work in the kind of the fleet maintenance industry and ended up doing all the things that I just talked about. So that's how I ended up here. Well, that's how I ended up in Arizona. Now, again, I don't know how much to get, because I really want to focus on what is happening in Idaho, but I think I can give you a little bit of background, because ultimately, after almost 140 years of ranching in the southern Nevada desert, the federal government came in, make a very long story short, and basically said we couldn't ranch there anymore. And my dad had rights to the ranch, deeded rights with the state of Nevada. And he challenged that, and there was a huge, legal battle that went on in the federal courts, with federal judges, with prosecutors, with federal, attorneys. And my dad said going into that scenario is like a man coming into your house and beating up your wife and children. So you take him to court to try to get justice. And when they say all the rights for the honorable judge, in walks the man in the black robe, and it's the very man that beat up your wife and children. And that's what it was like trying to defend his rights in a federal court when the federal government was the one trying to take it away. And ultimately he just said, no, you're not going to take my ranch away. And they said, well, we are going to take it. And then he said, hell no, you're not going to take it. And he stood strong because he knew that that was the time not to compromise. And ultimately, Obama gained enough political power as he thought, and they built an internal army inside these land agencies, and they sent a 213 armed federal army, really, of agents after my family. They began to destroy the water infrastructure that was over 100 years old. They began to shoot the cattle from the air, burying in mass graves. And they began to destroy the fences and the corrals. And there wasn't much we could do about it. The only thing we were able to do is film them. And then they began to, because they said that we had to, if we were going to protest or try to film them or anything, we had to be in this little area they call the First Amendment area, which is just a little corral made out of that 4-inch construction mesh. And it was miles away from, the ranch and where they were doing that. Well, we wouldn't do that. So they began to tase us. They began to say dogs at us. They began to beat us to the ground. And we took video of this and began to send it out to all the people across the country. And the response was amazing. Because people from all over the United States began to respond. And it changed everything. It changed everything. And it turned things right side up. And we were able, with the power of the people, to basically give them an ultimatum to leave. And so I experienced this right here. I'm just going to show you a couple pictures, because here is one where the people are going up to this military type compound and saying, look, we're not going to tolerate what you're doing to us and to this family. And then, literally, about an hour later from this picture, and on the other side there's guns and federal agents, hundreds of them, pointing their guns at us. And within about an hour, this was the federal agents leaving. And you can see here that for this picture, to appreciate it, this is a rear view mirror of a vehicle, and you can see all the vehicles behind, but he's only about a third or maybe even a fourth of the way in the line. Because you see where the freeway is, I-15? This line goes all the way on, winds up all the way, and they're leaving on the freeway. 107 vehicles, federal vehicles, left that area. All because the people responded. And it changed me. It changed the way I thought. It changed what I believed, or I didn't really understand before, because I began to understand that rights are not maintained in the courts or in the ballot books. There's important things that go on there, but that's not where rights are maintained. Rights are maintained on the basis in which they were established, and many times people have to come together to defend those rights. And I believe that we need to understand this, because we're going to be, in our lifetime, we're going to be challenged of whether we're going to preserve our rights or not. And we're going to have to stand together. And are we going to do that as a state, or or are we going to have to do that individually in communities or just with our friends or like this? I hope that we can do it as a state. I hope we can do it as a state. Now, let's get into what's happening in Idaho. Because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. It's an extreme battle that is going on right now. And many of you may not know the intensity of it. Maybe some of you do. But it's a battle that if we don't win, Idaho will never, ever look like or be like it's been since its inception, since it was created. And just to give you some facts, just to kind of set the groundwork here. As you know, Idaho is the fastest growing state in the United States, and it has been for a while. Since 2015, approximately 248,000 people have moved into Idaho. That's about 20,000 more people that live in Boise, our largest city. So imagine adding the city the size of Boise to our state every 10 years. Because that's what's going to happen. There's no indicators of Idaho slowing down as far as growth. So that is an extreme challenge, right? But to make matters worse, approximately 36% of the people moving to Idaho are liberal-minded. And they want desperately to change our conservative values into a more progressively woke place to live. And they're extremely active in doing this. And I'm going to talk to you, if I get a chance, I'm going to talk to you a little bit why they can spend so much time in this effort. Now, with the Republican Party members, or party really, controlling the Idaho Senate, House, and Governor's office for the past 26 years, you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the United States, but it's not. And think about that. The Republican platform is a righteous platform. It is a good platform. A platform of limited government, fiscal responsibility in government, eliminating abortion, protecting life, securing families and our rights. And yet, Idaho is not in any way leading the nation in those things. Yet we've had the governor's office, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, all Republicans for the last 3 decades. And actually, you can go back up to 4 decades other than the governor for just a few years. And so why haven't we put forth a Republican platform? Why are we not doing what the Republican platform puts forth? And it's because of why are these things going on? Why is Idaho seeing these things happening in our state? Now, I want to give you some facts that might shed some light on why this is happening. So, you might recognize this guy. Well, back in the early 2000s, you may or may not know that Governor Little, back then he was a senator, he was the only state representative in Idaho to support gay marriage. So this was even before, Bill and Hillary Clinton weren't even supporting it. This was back in remember the Proposition 8 movement when that was happening in California? Well, he was the only representative in Idaho, literally, between the Democrats and the Republicans to support gay marriage. Also, as governor, Idaho has increased its food stamps program by 24.2%. The largest of any state in the United States. You have to ask the question, why are we doing that? He's also pumping millions of dollars, just recently pumped $50 million into free government housing. Why is he doing that? Why is this important for you to know? I could go on. For example, he supported the Medicare expansion, Obamacare in Idaho. You remember that battle? Also, Idaho, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but 40%, 39.7% of Idaho's budget goes to welfare. Welfare. Under Governor Brad Little. So we have a problem. And why do I want you to know this? Well, because state housing, government welfare, free food, free health care, and pushing the gay ideology has been the staple of the leftist liberal agenda for decades. Right? If you were to bullet point what the left pushes, it's free housing, free welfare, free food, free education, free this, and pushing the gay ideology. And nobody has pushed that agenda more in Idaho than Governor Brad Little. And he's done it for many years. And yet, so let's go through this process. So he was a senator. Yeah, maybe no one knew about him, but he was a senator in the 2000s. And I think he ran for re-election. We put him in office again. And then he became the Senate Pro Tem. And then we put him in the Lieutenant Governor's office. And then we put him in the Governor's office. And he has been pushing this agenda since the beginning. He has continued to push it, but yet we have not been aware enough to recognize it because we're off working and taking care of our families, and we're producing and doing the things that we're supposed to do. But we're not paying enough attention to who we're putting in office, that we keep putting in this person. This is just one of them. We keep putting them in, and then we step back and go, well, why are we losing Idaho? Well, no wonder Idaho is in a fatal battle for its conservative soul. Now, I want to show you something here. I just need to kick out of this because I don't normally show this, but this is something that, if I can pull it up, I'm going to show you. Okay, so this is the Idaho GOP press release that came out yesterday. I'm going to read you one paragraph to show you that this is not just me saying it. This is the Republican Party chairman saying this. And this is only one sentence of 4 that she is explaining what is happening. So the second paragraph. After 10 years of meddling service in the state Senate, Fred Martin, who was a Republican, he was a Republican senator for 10 years. Fred Martin was defeated in this year's primary. Now he has decided to publicly confirm that what many of his own voters have long suspected by endorsing a Democrat for his former seat. Never mind that Democrat was once his opponent. Never mind that Democrat believes in abortion on demand after Martin has long claimed to be pro-life. Never mind that the Democrat is a member of the party seeking to sexualize Idaho's children after Martin has long claimed to be pro-family. So you can see here that this problem is not just me saying this because I'm wanting you to, somehow vote for me, because I'm trying to demonize. This is a problem that we have. And it's not just Governor Brad Little that is pushing this agenda. It is quite a few of them in there that are still in power and that we must be aware of. Now, if this was all, maybe we can kind of work through it and we can move on, correct it, move on, but that's not all, because under Brad Little's reign, Idaho has not only become the fastest growing state in the United States, which I don't blame on Governor Little, but it's also, again, not only the one with the most welfare programs increases, but during Brad Little's reign, Idaho was also the first in a few more things. Idaho was the first state to arrest pastors for having church services outside during the COVID pandemic. Did you know that? In Moscow, Idaho. Let me show you this. You have the sound for the... There he goes. They're taking a Bible out of his hand so that they can handcuff him in Idaho. And they did. They arrested 3 pastors. And they took him to jail and hooked him and began prosecuting him. In Idaho. In Idaho. So, boo, that's right. So I want to just... I can't say this and be upset. Every time I see this, every time I talk about it, it upsets me. And I want to just emphasize this. So, because if we go to the Constitution and we go to the First Amendment, right? Now, if you remember, most of the states would not ratify the Constitution without the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments. And so, if we go to the very first Bill of Rights, or the First Amendment, and we read the very first line, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Meaning, religion, the right to worship, it's off limits. The government does not have the right to infringe upon someone's right to worship. And then if there's any question, let's go to the Idaho Constitution. Okay? Let's go to the Idaho Constitution. Let's go to Article 1, Section 4, and it's titled Guarantee of Religious Liberties. And listen to this wording. The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinion. Again, very clear. And if there's any question after that, which I don't think there is, let's go to the back of the Idaho Constitution to Section 19, titled Religious Freedoms Guaranteed. And this is some beautiful writing. Listen to this. It says, it is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state, that would be Idaho, shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. Again, yeah. Well, I want to celebrate, except Idaho was the first state to arrest pastors for organizing church outside without masks. I mean, they were like, well, we're going to go worship outside then. And yet it is so clear, so clear. So you have to ask, what are these officers doing? They took an oath to the Constitution, both the U.S. and the state Constitution. They took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. And yet they're arresting pastors when it is so clear that it is off limits, that it is unlawful to do so. We have to ask why. Idaho is also the first state to arrest a mother for taking their children to the park. Remember that in Meridian, Idaho? Yeah. Meridian? Yeah. Idaho was also one of the first states to begin raiding businesses for not locking down during the COVID garbage. And so, again, you have to ask the question, why are our officers, why are our state acting like this? And I, again, want to say they're doing it because they're following this man's orders. And if you're questioning, I want to go to the order. Many of you may or may not have read this, but this is the summary page of the stay-at-home order that was issued on March 25th, 2020 in Idaho. And it says, this order directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. So he's ordering you to stay at home. Now, I don't remember ever giving him any authority to do that, and I certainly don't remember ever reading that the people give him authority to do that, yet he is ordering you and I to stay in our place of residence. And then he talks about some exceptions. You could leave. If you're a business that's essential, then you can stay in business. Otherwise, you have to close your business. And then, number 4, prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any number of individuals, including church, the right to worship. But yet it's so clear that he does not have that authority. And yet we have officers arresting pastors in Idaho trying to enforce his orders. Now you might be saying, well, was this really Brad Little, the governor, doing this? Well, let's go to the page 9, section 9 of the stay-at-home order. It says, the director requests that sheriffs and chiefs of police in the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. It says the violation of any provision of this order constitutes an imminent threat to public health. So this was not an order of suggestion. This was an order of enforcement. And that is why you see police doing this. And that's why you see him doing this. And why you see him doing this. In fact, here is a undercover Idaho State police officer issuing a citation to a business owner that later, just a couple days later, they raided and began prosecuting. And he says right at the beginning of this, when I play it, hopefully you can hear it, he says why he's doing it.
Would you say that again, sir? Hand him that letter back.
No.
I would like to hear him identify himself again.
I'm Jim Schwartzman with the Idaho State Police. Just delivered this letter in response to you guys opening it, in contrast to the state.
Did you catch that? He's issuing this letter in contrast to you opening up against the stay-at-home order. And again, I think 2 days later, they raided this business and began prosecuting the owners under the direction of Governor Brad Little. Now, just trying to bring the facts and reality of what is actually happening in Idaho. And I'm hoping to give you evidence so that you don't have to just believe me, that you can actually see and understand it yourself. Because what's the opposite of evidence? What's that? Propaganda. That's right. The opposite of evidence is propaganda. So I'm here presenting you information, and you have to decide whether it's evidence of the truth or whether it's propaganda. And so as I go through this, I want you to answer for yourself. Is this evidence or is this propaganda? Now, we might say, some of you might, or people, in general might say, well, he was in a bad situation. Governor Little was in a bad situation. You might say that he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Okay? I see a lot of heads shaking. No. But let's just hypothetically entertain the idea. Okay? So who remembers when Governor Little put the state of Idaho in a state of emergency? Right? You remember that time? Remember that feeling? So it was on March 13th, 2020. Well, I'm going to show you some evidence here. Because we're going to ask the question, did Governor Little do it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho? Because on March 13th, the very same day that he put the state of Idaho in state of emergency, that day was March 13th, and that was the same day that President Trump held a press conference and announced that $50 billion would be available to states that were in a state of emergency. The same day. And then Governor Little put us in a state of emergency. Now you might be saying, well, we really were in a state of emergency. But the problem with that is on the governor's own website, on March 13th, he said that there's only one confirmed COVID case. So he put the state of emergency of 9 million people, and one person had COVID, and we know they didn't really even supposedly know much about it back then. And he puts the state of Idaho in a state of emergency, and it just so happens to be that it's on the same day that $50 billion becomes available if you're in a state of emergency. Yeah. Now, let's keep going. Because if you remember, 12 days later, Governor Little put the state in extreme state of emergency. Do you remember that? This is when he did the stay-at-home order and everything got escalated and you didn't know whether you're going to get arrested for leaving your home. All of a sudden the church is shut down and everything happened, right? And we were literally, the people of Idaho were in terror. Now, that was on March 25th that he put the state in an extreme state of emergency. Well, it just so happened to be that on March 25th was the same day that President Trump and Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced a $2 trillion federal stimulus package for states that were in extreme state of emergency. Same day. We had 136 out of almost 2 million people. We had 136 unconfirmed COVID cases. No deaths, and they were kept calling it the novel coronavirus. Now, we're looking at evidence here. If you start to look at Governor Little's own documents, his proclamations and his orders, he begins to tell you right out why he's put the state in emergency and extreme emergency. Right here he says it's securing millions of dollars in funds, and he says we're at on March 13th. They had one case, and President Trump issued this proclamation, and then down here, remember this section 46601, because this is the authority that he says he's acting under. 46601, that would be the state statute. Right here is a letter that he wrote to President Trump, thanking him for the first $1.25 billion. Right here, this is a really interesting one. This is Executive Order 2020-07, so it would be the 7th Executive Order of 2020. And he says here, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13, 2020 declaring a state of emergency in the state of Idaho. Whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25, 2020 declaring a state of extreme emergency in the state of Idaho. Whereas Congress has passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19. So now he's getting to what he's doing. And then he says, whereas I anticipate additional congressional action on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19. So there's more coming. There's a lot more coming, right? And then he says, now therefore, I, Brad Little, governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members and appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So what did he do there? He got a little committee together of his buddies that he appoints and that serve at his pleasure. And they together, that little group, a handful of his buddies that serve at his pleasure, they get to decide where all the funds coming from the federal government, all these COVID funds, get to go to, right? And in fact, he says on the last page of this order, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. Okay, so how are the funds of the state of Idaho who's supposed to administer the funds of the state of Idaho? The legislature is, right? Our representatives. They're supposed to go up, and there's 105 of them. They all battle about, how they're going to spend the funds. And there are representatives, and they ultimately have to agree upon it, and then that's where the funds go. Why is it important that it happens that way? Why did our founders make it so that the legislature administers the funds of the state and not a small group of people? What's that? So our representatives, that's part of it. Why else? Right? Because it's a very open thing. There's 105 of them. It's very open. It's all transparent. They have to argue and debate it and decide what to do with it. And it's not a small group of people in the back room deciding what to do with, billions of taxpayers' dollars, right? Our founders believed that if it was done that way, it'd be less abused. And it wouldn't be wasted. If you get a small group of people doing it in a back room, then you wouldn't know where it went. We wouldn't know where it went. It would be used to increase their power, to line the pockets of their buddies. A lot of it would be wasted. They would use it to build bureaucracies and other things. And so they didn't want it to be in the hands of a small group of people. But what did Governor Little do here? What did he do here? He says, I'm creating this committee, and it's comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor, and we are literally a handful of them are going to decide what we're going to do with these funds. Now, anybody have an idea how much we're talking about? Because maybe it's just a few $1 million or maybe $1 billion, and somehow we think that that's not a lot of money. But anybody have an idea?
18 billion.
It's right now. It's a record. Which we believe that there may be more, but we have a record that it's $18.7 billion that this committee received, and then they have control of it. That's over 2 times Idaho's annual state budget. So imagine it. He bypassed the legislature and put it in his hands. Now, to further, remember that 46601 that I showed you, that he said he has authority to do what he's doing? Well, let's go to that. 46601 is titled 46 Militia and Military Affairs, Chapter 6, Martial Law and Active Duty, 46601 Authority of the Governor. So what laws did he implement? What did he put Idaho under? Say it, what's that? Martial law. There's no, it's not a hyperbole. I am not saying that to excite. He put the state of Idaho and the people of Idaho under martial law. He absolutely used this law that's never been used before, that was supposed to be used to enact protection on the people. So if there was an invasion, or if there was a flood, or if there was some reason that he needed to act to protect people's rights, then he has this power. But he used it against the people. Now look at what he did. Remember, there was no real extreme state of emergency. Well, I just showed you the evidence of that. But right here, section 2, during a period of state of extreme emergency, which he created, right, himself, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area all policing power vested in the state. We'll read it again. During a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power within the state. What do we call it? It's a dictatorship. It's not a republic form of government. It's a contrary to government, to a republic form. It's a different type of government. And he held us under these powers for over 700 days. 700 days. Never before used powers. He had unconstitutionally used them. Now, remember, we're answering the question, well, did he do it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho? Well, on March 8, 2022, so that wasn't very long ago, that was this year, he issued a press release and he said this. If there was any doubt, this is what he said. The emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. So, he didn't say he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. He didn't say he did it for all these other things. He says the emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. Then he says, without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide historic tax relief. A step that's even more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Without the emergency declaration, Idaho would not be the state with the strongest economy in the nation. So he's not saying that Idaho is strong economically because of all the commerce and everything that's going on. He's saying because they recoup so much FEMA dollars, so much federal dollars, that now we have historic tax relief and it's the strongest economy in the nation. Well, that's not strength. And isn't this such an irony that he says that this emergency declaration providing historic tax relief, a step that's even more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Well, what caused the inflation? The federal government dumping billions of dollars into the states. So the very thing that caused the inflation is now what he is claiming is so good that we got because of the inflation. If you were to apply these ideas in your family finances, what do you think would happen to your finances? Right? You would be homeless, yes. You'd be homeless. And now, if we have the governor of the state of Idaho who thinks this way, or at least is trying to convince the people somehow that this is fiscal responsibility. And it's absolutely not in any way. He says, without the emergency declaration, the state of Idaho would not be able to provide Idaho with historic tax relief. It says it again. Now, you may have received this letter in the mail, along with the check. Or it came direct deposit, and this came in an email. Because he gave hundreds of thousands of Idaho voters a check, a tax relief, right before the Republican primaries. Right before the primaries. Yeah. It has nothing to do with votes, right? So, and listen to what he says. He says, the economy of Idaho continues to blow past projections, and we are leading the country in economic prosperity. We know why he's claiming that, right? Because he's received $18+ billion. And he says, we achieved historic tax relief for Idahans for a second year in a row. We are returning your tax dollars with a record budget surplus. Now, let's just think about this for a little bit. What 2 years, look, the date is early 2022. So what 2 years is he talking about? 2020 and 2021. Right? And he's saying that they amassed a record budget surplus during the dark months of the pandemic, when the economy was closed for months and months on end. Businesses weren't able to be open, people weren't going to work, schools were closed down. We didn't know, what was left and what was right. The people were in terror. And he's claiming that somehow during that period of time, Idaho amassed a record budget, has the best 2 years they've ever had. Now, if you look at the hill here, and you look down here, what Adam 2 says, let me just read you this. The impact of the pandemic on the U.S. and global economy was catastrophic. Economic historian Adam 2 characterized its impact as being the swiftest and most comprehensive contraction of global economic activity ever. So during this period of time, it's the worst global activity ever, the worst economic downturn ever in history. And Brad Little is claiming that it's the best 2 years Idaho has ever had. And therefore, we're going to give you a little bit of this money back because we're experiencing record budget surpluses right before the Republican primary. And he's about ready to do it again. He's getting ready to issue another tax rebate right before the general elections. And the only reason he's able to do this is because he received billions and billions of dollars from the federal government. And well, he's paid off and he's trying to pay the people, he's trying to buy your vote. Now, to top it all off, we have to go back to his press release. Because on March 8th, April 8th, March 8th, 2022, I'll get it right, he issued his press release and he said this here. Again, Governor Little statements. I kept Idaho open, banned vaccine passports, never issued mandates or vaccines or masks. The emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans, never put Idaho on lockdown, and have never allowed for mandates for masks or vaccines. These are the facts. I don't know what Idaho he lived in, right? But all I know is pastors were being arrested in Idaho, our beautiful state, for having church services outside. Mothers were being arrested. Sarah Brady, still today, is being prosecuted by the state, still today. 2 years later, she still has not been given a trial. And I talked to her a couple Sundays ago, and she has amassed over $26,000 in legal fees. Imagine what that family's going through. Why won't the state back away from this? Why won't they? Why were hundreds of businesses or thousands of businesses were put out of business because they were declared non-essential? And this is what happened in Idaho, and our governor has the audacity to say that not only were rights not restricted or violated, but he said they were never restricted. Right? And I don't understand how he could possibly even claim such a thing when his own orders directed the sheriffs and chiefs of police in the state of Idaho and Idaho State Police to ensure compliance with and enforce this order, including stopping people from worshiping. So we have a problem. We have a problem here. And I've just touched on a few of them. I have not touched on even the many, many things that we have, all the way from the restriction of parental rights, the suspension of legislative laws, and the pushing of the liberal agenda that is really infiltrating and coming into Idaho strong. As you may know, when it comes to Boise having the Pride Fest, and where they were actually going to make part of that, where they have a children's drag queen program where they're up in front of all of this audience and the sexual implications of that, the sexualization of our children. So at this point, I have a lot more material that I could certainly show you, but I want to get to some of your questions because we're pushing 9 o'clock, and I want to be able to answer some of your questions and talk about anything that questions you have. And I hope that everybody will stick with me. We'll cut this off and really try to get through this. But I think the questions we'll learn a lot about. So go ahead.
Yeah, Dennis Coyle. Why did our legislative leaders not stand up against these actions from our very weak and unintelligent government?
Okay, very, very good question. Because the law says that in an emergency situation, the governor can implement these laws, but only for 30 days. And then if it's an extreme emergency, he can extend it for another 30 days. But then the law says that the legislature shall convene on the 90th day if the governor will not relinquish this power. Well, there was a call for the legislatures to obey the law and come on June 23rd, 2020. But the legislatures, only a few of them showed up. I think there was 15 of them that showed up. So they didn't have enough of a quorum to end the emergency, because it says that the legislature has the power to end the emergency. Now the question is why didn't more legislatures show up? And the reason why is because the governor and the governor's attorney each one of them issued to each legislature that they did not have authority to convene without permission from the governor. And so they didn't. Now imagine, we were taught, equal branches of government, the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and how they all check and balance each other. Well, imagine the governor saying to the legislative branch, you can't convene and end my power unless I give you permission to convene and end my power. Does that even make sense at all? But our weak and evidently uninformed legislature actually followed that, other than 15 of them, and they weren't able to create a quorum and end the governor's emergency powers. So we held on to them, I think, for 741 days. So great question. Right over here. I'm going to make you run, Shane. Run. Yeah, Shane's awesome. Speak into it a little bit.
If you're elected governor, what are your first 3 priorities?
Okay, great question. If I'm elected governor, what are 3 main priorities? Number 1, protection of life. Roe versus Wade pushed the question back onto the states. But we have yet to have a state that has drawn the line in the sand, that we will not allow abortion to go on, legal abortions to go on in the state, including Idaho. So number 1, I will settle the issue in Idaho, the issue of abortion. And how will that be done? Through executive order, until we can get it done in the legislature, declaring that life begins at conception, and that the state's duty is to protect that life. The laws to protect life are already in place in Idaho. Yet somehow we don't believe that they apply to the most innocent, the most vulnerable. And so all I will simply be doing is declaring that the laws also apply to the unborn. And so that's number 1. Number 2, there's a few things. I have been very vocal about eliminating our current property tax system. And of course, the very first thing that people will say, which I appreciate, is, well, how are you going to pay for the legitimate, purposes of government, especially local purposes of government? And so I want to show you here what I'm proposing, but I want to get, so our current property tax system was actually adopted it's a Marxist idea. It's a communist idea. And in fact, if you go to the Communist Manifesto, it goes through it, and there's 10 planks. And the very first one says the abolition of private property. In fact, Karl Marx, who was the author of the Communist Manifesto, he said that communism can be summed up into a single sentence. the abolition of private property. So the number one goal of communism is to eliminate private property, to get rid of it. And I believe that we have to go completely opposite of that. We need to protect our property. Because our current property tax system is a way for the state to deify itself and says they own everything. And if you don't pay them, they can take it. And you never become a true owner of your property. But the challenge is how do we pay for the legitimate purposes of government? So this is our current property tax system. Let's take a home of $400,000, which is about the average cost of the homes in Idaho, believe it or not. That home would bring in anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 depending on the county. So that's a number you need. So in a 30-year period, the tax collected on that home would be $60,000 to $90,000. So that's the number we need to get to replace the current property tax system, right? $60,000 to $90,000. But the problem with our current property tax system is you pay on your home until you die, and you never really own it. In fact, did you know that people today, every day, are losing their homes to the state because they can't pay their taxes? And it's usually the elderly, by far the elderly, but it's also the disabled or those who lose their job for a long period of time. They're losing their homes to the state. And just a fact that you might find interesting is that during the Depression in the 30s, the Great Depression, more people lost their homes to the state because they couldn't pay the property tax than they did to the banks because they couldn't pay the mortgage. So I'm proposing that we replace our current property tax system with a consumption tax. And so it would look like this. Let's take that same $400,000 home and let's apply a 5%, because it's easy math, 5% a consumption tax. So that would be due at the time of sale. That, on that $400,000 home, that would be $20,000. And, some might say, well, people don't have $20,000 up front. Well, it can be rolled into the mortgage. There's certain things that the state will need to do to help that happen, to roll it into the mortgage. And so it would be paying very much like if your taxes are impacted, which a lot of taxes are impacted today. So, now you might be saying that $20,000 is a far cry from the $60,000 to $90,000. But you have to calculate that in a 30-year period, homes, properties in Idaho sell 3 to 5 times. And so if you calculate that in a 30-year period, that would be $60,000 to $100,000 that would be going for the legitimate purposes of government, local government. And it would more than replace our current property tax system. And so this is what I'm proposing that we put into place. We have to be wise. It would have to be put into place over like probably a 5 to 7 year period of time so that we can phase into it. People that are paying their taxes now will continue to pay that for 5 to 7 year period of time and then allow the sales of homes to catch up. And that's how we phase into it. And the negative side to this, which I want to be upfront and say there is a negative side to this, and that is that if you did roll that $20,000 into the mortgage, then you're going to have to pay interest on it. But to me, that's well worth owning your own property. Yes?
What about fluctuation of value?
It's going to fluctuate in value just like it does now, just like anything else that we buy. So it will fluctuate, but there is a benefit too. The benefit is that the county, when there's an increase in people moving in, they're going to automatically get that money up front. So they can build infrastructure, the things that they need to build. Go ahead.
But how are you factoring that in the collected dollars that you need? If the values go down, that diminishes that figure also.
Yeah, it does, but there's nothing that's going to secure, government or our personal finances from a decline. Things go up, things go down. We have to project the best we can. We have to, react if they do go down. That's just part of life. That's part of what our government has to do now. They do try to project it if they can. It's no different than anybody else's finances. But, that is a challenge always when you're dealing with finances. They will go up and down. And there will be times where there's a huge increase and when there's not. And the county will have to deal with that. There should be no assurity for the county or anybody else to just get paid a certain amount no matter what, even if the people are in a depression. The county should get that same amount. And so it really does follow the people, and this system really would follow what would be going on.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
How many of you think the county assessor gets it right when they put a value on your house for your taxes? Okay, when your house sells, that's the value of your house.
Yeah.
That's what you pay.
Yeah, so that's another thing, is it is a real live, valuation on your home. And just, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but let's say I was buying this computer. I think this computer cost me like $1,500. Well, when I bought it, I paid a consumption tax on it. I paid a sales tax. And guess what? After that, this computer is mine. Imagine if I had to pay $200 every year as long as I have it. It wouldn't be right. And so everything else that we buy with a consumption tax. We fund government. We might not like it. We got to make sure that we keep it reasonable. But when we're done, it's ours. We own it. And except our property, except our homes and our lands. The most valuable thing, the very thing that the Communist Manifesto says the state needs to get control of in order to implement communism. So this is my plan and proposal. I've kind of gone right here. Right back here, and then right over here. Oh yeah. Well, let's see if he asks you about, because number 3 I want to talk to you about. Go ahead.
How do we get back to our state land from the federal government?
Okay, I didn't have to say it because that's number 3. Did you have a question about the property tax? So let me answer this question first, and then I'm going to go into yours.
What would be the advantage of a consumption tax versus a sales tax that goes to the buyer or the seller who's taking some money up front? There isn't financing.
So let me understand your question a little more. Can you give it back to me? Because
He's trying to differentiate consumption tax versus sales tax. What's the difference?
A sales tax is a consumption tax. It's a fancy word for consumption tax. A sales tax is, it's the same thing. Go ahead. Give me the mic so I can hear.
What I'm saying is the seller paying tax versus the buyer paying tax.
Hey, if you're a good negotiator, it doesn't matter. It's like closing fees. If you're a good negotiator, you try to get the other person to close, pay the closing fee. That certainly can be. That would be up to the buyer and the seller. And it would be up to the bank if they wanted to mortgage it. So absolutely, that also could be something that becomes a normal in these transactions as well. Okay, so now you asked what were the top 3, and then you brought the third one up, and that is getting control of Idaho lands. So I want to for the next few minutes while I have you, I want to emphasize why this is so important. This isn't just a pet peeve of mine because my dad ranches in the southern Nevada desert. And we spent 2 years in federal prison and half that time in solitary confinement. That's not why. Although it is very important to me to emphasize this, that is not why. The future of Idaho depends upon us taking back our lands. And I hopefully by the time I'm done explaining this, you will be able to see that, because the red right here is the federal controlled land in Idaho. The red. This is not Republican counties, although it's about the same, right? This is federally controlled land in Idaho. 61% of our land in Idaho federally controlled, and 72% of our subsurface mineral rights. Well, what is this causing? Well, it's causing many things, but I'm going to get out of here again, and I want to show you. There's 4 main things that it's causing, and I'm going to go over there, but I want to show you a few more things here. Let's see if I got them open. Nope. So I'm going to have to get in here. I don't always show this, but okay. So this is something that you may or may not have seen. Okay. So west of the Colorado Rockies, the federal government controls 51% of the land, and east of the Colorado Rockies, the federal government controls 2.4%, because these states were constitutionally established, and the federal government has been held to the Constitution in these states, for the most part, to military bases, post offices, and enumerated purposes authorized by the Constitution. But the Western United States, we have been unconstitutionally taken over by the federal government. Now, look at that map, okay? Put it in your mind, you know. Close your eyes and envision it, because I'm going to show you a few other things, okay? I want to show you here, where did I go? Right here. I want to show you the fire history in the United States. Okay, isn't that? Now, I want to show you also, the fires that are going on right now in the United States. Look at Idaho, by the way. I mean, Idaho on fire, right? There's a website that's actually very valuable. Go to idahoonfire.com. But Idaho is on fire. But look at that line. Look at that. West of the Colorado Rockies. East of the Colorado Rockies. Does that remind you of another map? Right? What about this here? We might say, well, what's the motive? This is just a segue, but what's the motive of the federal government to control these lands? Are they trying to do it to preserve it for the next generation, like they claim? Are they trying to do it, because this is public land and it's our heritage, or it's our in trust? They say that's all garbage. Let me show you another map. This is a map of the gold mines and mercury mines in the United States. And almost every one of these mines, you have to pay the federal government now in order to mine and get a permit from the federal government. So, you start to ask, well, what is the true motive of the federal government? I mean, look at this. Gold mines and mercury mines west of the Colorado Rockies versus east of the Colorado Rockies. There's estimated over $117 trillion of subsurface minerals in the western United States. $117 trillion. Think about that number a little bit. Let's look at this. Let's go to uranium. Let's look at uranium. Very important material, right? I could go on and on and on. I could show you that what is happening in the United States. Now, let's go back here. I'm going to get back into my presentation here, because this is causing several things to happen in Idaho and across the United States. But one is Idaho is not able to pay its own bills. Idaho is not able, and has not been able to pay its own bills for the last 38 years. Every year, we've had to go back to the federal government and get over a third of our budget. This is where our money comes into the state. This is the state's own graph. This is not my graph. This is theirs. So 36.4% in 2021 of our budget came from the federal government. Why? Because we can't pay our own bills. Why can't we pay our own bills? Because we can't mine our own materials. We can't graze our own grass. We can't harvest our own forests. So that's where wealth comes from. Any of you that are in agriculture or understands this knows that wealth comes from the earth. And we're not able to pay our own bills. And so because 61% of our land and 72% of our subsurface mineral rights are being controlled by the federal government, and so what happens? Well, here's a perfect example. Idaho has the largest cobalt deposits in the United States, some of the most wealthy cobalt deposits in the world, right? Well, the federal government claims them. They claim it, and so what do? They lease it out to an Australian mining company. The Australian mining company comes up here, brings most of their higher paid employees, might hire a few employees in Idaho, might buy a few gallons of gas and do a little bit of good here. But then they take that cobalt and they make millions of dollars off it. The federal government, they pay the federal government a lease on it, and they make billions of dollars on it, and the people of Idaho are cut out of it. And so what does Idaho have to do? Idaho has to go back to the federal government and beg for money to pay their own bills. But the problem is that money doesn't come without strings attached. And so we cry and moan about how Common Core is being implemented in our schools. When you go down to your own school district and you find out that they signed a contract with the federal government to implement Common Core in our schools, and they did it so they could get $2 or $3 million worth of federal money. Our policing agencies have done this. That's why the use of force policies all come from the federal government. Our counties are doing it. Our states are doing it. We wonder why we have UN building codes in our counties. And it's because the county agreed with the federal government to implement UN building codes so that they could get millions of dollars of federal fundings. All of our mandates that came down from the federal government, all the COVID mandates, the masks and all of that, that came down through what they called the White House profiles, and it was pushed because the state agreed to massive amounts of federal funding and mandates. And the founders called this, what they called this, if we were to allow it to happen, which has happened, they said that it would put the states and the people into undue obedience. Undue obedience. So, that's exactly where we're at. So man, that was a mouthful, right? That was just one reason. So, two, because I said there's four main reasons why we have to get our land back. One is so we pay our own bills. Two is because it is the main cause of our affordable housing crisis in Idaho. Okay, we are landlocked. And I told you that I have a daughter that's 20 years old, and her husband and her are expecting. Now they're going to school, so they're not quite ready for a home and all of that. But soon they will be. And the reality for them right now is that they will never own a home in Idaho. They will have to leave the state or be a renter in order to remain here in Idaho. That's what we are doing to the next generation because of this right here. And if our children and our children's children are going to have a future in Idaho, we have to take back this land. We have to take it back. Why? Well, it's landlocked. It's landlocked. And also, it's not just landlocked. Our building materials are landlocked. We're not able to harvest our own forest. So guess where our lumber's coming from? It's coming from Canada. And we're paying 3 or 4 times the amount for it. You know, we're not able to get minerals from the ground that we need to build housing. We cannot build our own houses without a huge expense by importing the materials right here in Idaho. And then we can add on top of that the restrictions and regulations that are being placed upon us for building our own homes. So that's number 2. Number 3, and you'll appreciate this. Where are we building our homes? Well, remember, the white area is the private property. So why is it white? Why does it look like that? Why is it everywhere? What is this white area versus this red area? Anybody want to give it a shot? What's that? What's that? BLM. Say it again. BLM. Okay, that's the red, right? But I'm asking, what is this white? It's private property, but why is it like that? Why is it all shaped like that? No, this is the agricultural land. This is the farm ground. This is where your water is. And what happened is, contrary to what most people believe, when Idaho was developed, or the West, actually when the whole United States was developed, they went out and developed the places where there's water. And it became private property. And the federal government came in later. In the 1960s, 70s, they came in later to claim this. Not in the 1800s, like most people believe. The private property owners came in, or the farmers and ranchers came in where there was water and claimed this first. And that's why, simply because the people claimed it. So now we're landlocked, and so where do we have to build our homes? Right on the farmland. That's right, on our agricultural land. And remember how I said there's 250,000 people moving in Idaho every 10 years? Well, what is the number one industry in Idaho? It's agriculture. We are destroying our number one industry just simply because we're trying to fight over this land to build homes, right? We are destroying our number one industry. Why can't we take these hills and these areas around these towns that are perfect for development? We need to be able to do this so that we can preserve our agriculture identity, our number one industry in Idaho, and still be able to build and have communities and homes for the next generation. And as you know, you cannot get this land back once you've developed it. You can't get it back into farm ground. It's got gravel, underground, it's got different levels, elevation. The cost would be enormous to try to restore it. And you can't make farm ground out of this other stuff. You really practically can't, but it's great for development. So that's number 3. And number 4 is what we are doing because of this. We are driving the next generation to the cities. We're driving to the cities because they can't, in these little towns, in these areas, they can't make a living without the use of the natural resources and being able to expand. And we're creating these cities where they're densely populated, there's pollution, there's crime, there's traffic. And when you do that, when you put a young family into an apartment, or you put them into a place where they don't own, where they can't plant, where they can't mow their own grass, they lose their conservative identity. And they become this liberal voting bloc that outvotes everybody else. And that's what's happening in Idaho right now. That's what's happening in Ada County. And I call it the Hunger Games syndrome, where the rest of us out here are just funneling our resources and our money and everything else to try to fund them, while they're living off the state, living off the rest of the people, and they're having their games, and the men are dressing up all weird, just like the Hunger Games, and the rest of us are basically being outvoted and out basically controlled. So I know I went on for a long time, and I'm going to wrap this up here, but I wanted to emphasize to you the importance. The importance of getting back our lands in Idaho, how it is absolutely detrimental. Yes?
Yeah, I was wondering what your opinion was of the Convention of States.
Okay, I get that question a lot about the Convention of States, and what it really boils down to is it certainly is an authority of the state in Article 5 to be able to go, enforce the Convention of States. But this is the big question. What makes anybody think that the state's representatives could go to a convention and come back with anything better than the Constitution we have? I don't believe we can. In fact, we'd open up a Pandora's box if that really happened. And we would come back with something that I don't think anybody would like. And so that's my position on it. I know that there's tools that they're trying to use to force Congress into certain policies, and I can respect that. But overall, I don't want a convention that's going to amend the Constitution. What I want is the government to follow the Constitution that we have. All right, I've got to wrap this up. Okay, one more question.
How are you on the open borders?
How do I feel about open borders, or how? So luckily, we're not on the southern border, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the government. Well, it is actually. I really appreciate you asking me this question because I want to wrap this up. I'm going to answer your question, and then but it is so important because. So what you asked me about, borders and how do we, control the influx of people coming, and Idaho has kind of the same problem, but they're coming from other states, right? We don't have a southern border problem, but they're coming from other states, and I believe statistically we can categorize the people that are coming here into 3 different categories. I don't want to stereotype people, but I think it's fair enough to categorize them into 3 different categories. One is, and the majority are those who are coming to this country or even to the state. Let's just say the country at this point. They're coming for a handout. They're coming here because we have free housing, we have free education, we have free health care, we have food stamps. A lot of places have free transportation, and they're coming here. Yeah, they're coming here because we have a lot of free stuff. Okay. Number two are people coming here for criminal opportunity. They're coming here to prey upon the people. There's lots of wealth here. Our laws are becoming weaker and weaker, and the protection is becoming weaker and weaker, and they're coming here to prey upon the people for criminal opportunity. That's number two. Number three, they're coming here because they truly want to be free. They don't want free stuff. They want opportunity. They're willing to work for it. They are good neighbors. They produce, and they're good people. Okay? So those are the three categories. Out of those three categories, who do we want here? We want the number three. I always have to be really careful with my fingers on this. We want number three, right? And we want to stop those who are coming here for criminal opportunity. So how do we stop it? We need to enforce the laws that we have, right? We need to strengthen and enforce those laws. We need to make sure that the perpetrator is caught, the victim is restored, and the punishment is implied. We need to give them due process, of course, but we need to send the message throughout the world, don't come to the United States, don't come to Idaho, because you will get caught and you'll have to pay for your crimes. Okay? Those who are coming here for handouts, how do we stop them from coming here for handouts? We stop the handouts. It's just simple, right? We stop the handouts. Okay? Now, this brings us full circle because look at how Idaho is spending their money. 39.7%, almost 40% of Idaho's budget is going to welfare. This isn't 2021. This is the government's own graphs. This is not mine. So what do you think, what message are we sending to the rest of the world, to the rest of the states, or to the world? Come to Idaho. You get free housing, free welfare. Remember, Governor Little has increased food stamp program by 24.2%. We're sending the message to bring the wrong people. And if we cut this out, and then wouldn't it maybe just free us up from taking so much of this right here, right? The federal money? If we were to cut this out, we would attract the right kind of people. And we would see our freeways full of people going to Oregon for food stamps. And they would go and live in those states and not here in Idaho. And it's just simple, right? It's very simple. So thank you for that question. That's what I believe. I believe that economically is how we control the influx of the state, and we do it through free market principles, and we stop the handouts, we implement our laws that are created to protect us, and we enforce them, and then we invite those people who want to come in here to work and produce, to be good neighbors, and to just be part of the culture that people of Idaho are, and I'm good with that. And so that's what I believe strongly needs to happen in Idaho. Now, I just want to really quickly, and I am going to close up here, and I appreciate your patience. I've had you for a long time. But I want to just emphasize the 8 planks to the Keep Idaho plan. 1, to protect private property. We've talked about that. Thank you. 2, eliminate progressive taxes. 3, free Idaho from federal control. 4, make Idaho independent again. Some people say, well, what do you mean again? Well, for 38 years we haven't been able to pay our own bills, right? That's just one aspect. We need to be independent. If we need to, what about fuel refineries? What about, the list can go on. Why can't we not be more independent so that we are less dependent on what the world economies, the world markets, and the federal government is doing? They're destroying the dollar. Well, Idaho needs to become independent, more independent, so that we can get through this rough time that we're going to go through when the dollar stops becoming the world currency. And if we don't wake up to that, that it's going to be detrimental to us. I'm talking about 3/4 of your wealth gone just like that. Historically, that's the way it is. 5, bring back the rule of law. Okay, I got you. I'll answer your question. Bring back the rule of law. And boy, do we need that. I can tell you story after story. The months and months and months and the years in federal prison, months in solitary confinement, simply because the rule of law was not implemented. We need to bring it back. 6, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. We're resource rich in Idaho. They call us the gem state. They don't call us a gem state because we're poor. There's no reason why Idaho can't be an economic powerhouse. Did you know Lewiston is a seaport? We could actually import and import if we went through, it'll be a lot of work, but the opportunity here in Idaho is tremendous for us to be an economic powerhouse. They don't call the Treasure Valley for nothing. We are resource rich. And we need to preserve that. We need to still preserve our hunting, hiking, fishing, our grazing, logging, mining. We need to preserve all of that on these lands. But we should be an economic powerhouse. 7, secure the quality of life for every Idaho family. That's the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to protect the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We need to simply use the state for the purpose in which it was created. And number 8, make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. And boy, do we need. So these are my goals. I hope that you have found that this has been useful to hear and understand what is going on, what we need to do, and also the plan that I believe that we can implement if we all get together and unite in this. And so I'm asking you to do 3 things today, because I don't want you to leave here without an action plan. I'm asking you, 1, to go to votebundy.com. There's tons of information there. And subscribe to my emails. Receive my emails. Because I'm going to be sending out information over the next 35 days that you're going to be able to send out that are going to help convince your friends, your families, your neighbors that this is the right direction to go and that the other direction is not the right direction to go. And I can't communicate with you unless you subscribe. So vote Bundy, send the links, all of that. 2, I'm asking you to go and take a yard sign. Put it in your front yard. You want to have a good conversation with your neighbors? We'll put a Bundy for Governor yard sign in your front yard, and all of a sudden, put a bumper sticker on your car. Wear a pin. And wear a t-shirt, the Bundy for Governor t-shirt. They're there to start the conversation, to get people to go to votebundy.com and to see that there is a difference here, that there is a plan, and that Idaho has yet to even reach its potential, even close to its potential. All we got to do is unite. And then last, of course, I have to ask for money. It's expensive, and as was mentioned here earlier, every dollar that you give will go to send this message to other people that are never going to come to these meetings, other people that are browsing around on the internet, and that will vote. They will vote, but they will not necessarily be informed other than simply us paying to get in front of them. So I need you to contribute to our campaign. I appreciate your time. I know I've had you for a very long time, and I'm grateful for you because I truly believe that Idaho is a special place, that it must become a refuge for good people to live. Must be. And so this is my plan, and thank you for your time. Thank you.